Hey, how's it going, everybody? Pragmatic Addict here. I'm going to be talking about Olivia Wilde's new film, Don't Worry, Darling. So this film has been the talk of the town for a number of reasons. I mean, from, the whole spit incident with Harry Styles and Chris Pine, the obvious controversies, with Shia LaBeouf, to Olivia Wilde being handed the papers from Jason Sudeikis at the reveal for this movie, to obviously, yes, the polarized reception. So Don't Worry, Darling takes place in the 1950s in a town called Victory, where the men in the neighborhood go to work and do a top secret mission while the women stay at home and, bathe in the succulent sun, do their thing, stay beautiful, stay active, and clean. It's the 1950s, they're women. And soon, our main character, Alice, played by Florence Pugh, starts suspecting that this town and this world may not be what it seems, and she starts to suspect just what are these dudes up to. So right off the bat, what I will say is that immediately the aesthetic of this film, the whole 1950s spin on it, I had so much fun with. I would almost say that I kind of had like a noir kind of like effect to it. And also what I want to address immediately is that right off hand, there were a lot of things that I wasn't sure how I felt about them, but I knew I needed to talk about them. So this film is very choreographed, if that makes sense. We see a lot of the directing as far as that goes, like, where a lot of, like, for example, like when the men are going to work and, like, they're pulling out in their vehicles, it's like a line and they're all different colors, of course, in this little, like, cul-de-sac kind of thing, and all the women of each house are like right in front of their lawns all waving, and they all go in at the same time while the cars leave at the same time, one by one, in like a train kind of fashion, again all different colors. And what I can say about this is that it felt very stimulated of a movie, and with this premise, this felt more or less pretty natural. But I couldn't help but find it just like a little bit corny. Because you can tell it's going for that, effect, that like 1950s style kind of like, cryptic mystery, movie. But there was just a lot of other things that were just very distracting that went along with it. Like Harry Styles, for example, which I wouldn't say was quote unquote bad right offhand, but much like, the film's, choreography, it felt very forced. Really, the thing, to no surprise that stood out to me the most was Florence Pugh in this movie. Now, the next thing I want to talk about that I actually did have, a lot of fun with was how fast the movie actually moved. It really does feel like you're just looking down on this community, just watching these people, live their lives. And again, the movie is, very vibrant. It's got that, that 1950s aesthetic to it. And as colorful as the movie was, just in every aspect really up to this point, more or less, as well as, yes, Olivia Wilde's direction with this kind of, premise, I just felt like, it just felt like there was, a lot to unpack. It felt like the film had a lot of variety up to this point. But one thing I kept telling myself, even before, like, it really, came into, a big kind of, like, point of view was, like, don't bash on Harry Styles' accent that much. Don't try and look out for that. Don't try and make that a big deal, because for all that this film had going for it, again, the talk of the town, another thing was his accent was getting pretty mixed reception. And yeah, it was definitely distracting. Because yes, not only did the accent just kind of fall flat, period, but I could have swore that, throughout the movie, he was actually tuning in and out of having this accent. Like you could tell that Harry Styles didn't really have a major acting credit like this before. But going back to the movie itself, another thing that kept this film, more or less attached was the soundtrack, man. The music in this movie. This is a very seemingly, wide movie. I mean, it's got a lot to it. There's a lot to unpack again. And, for this film also, going forward, mentioning that this film actually clocks in at almost 2 hours. I think a little bit more. I could shit you not, guys. I don't think that there was a second of this movie where there wasn't something musically inclined going on. Whether it was a song that was playing, whether it was, Florence Pugh humming something, whether it was something that, had to do with dance. There was always something musically attached to this film. And I was surprised, again, with this being an, over 2 hour film, I was surprised at just how well it actually contributed to this film. And going back to the movie, so yes, I don't believe that, the film really did too much wrong, at least, with its introduction, besides of, what I stated earlier. But centering on Chris Pine's character, getting to that now, I was very mixed just all throughout the movie on his character. Especially, once he really got into the picture where he was kind of more or less, a center at points. Because his character, you get the feeling that, this is where shit's really about to, take off. And, I just felt like up to this point, everything, and not even, up to this point, just, once I really got to see Chris Pine, give what he was going to for this movie, I just felt like everything up to this point was much more engaging. And that was a big issue for me because, he is a crucial character to this story. He's got a very cliche, very typical and ominous setup to him that I just didn't really dig. And for a plot point like this, introducing his character and where he stands, with the movie's story, it just really threw me off. And going forward now, there is a scene where, Harry Styles and Florence Pugh, they, get busy. And it's a very tense scene, actually. From the setup to the build-up to the atmosphere to how it, actually even escalates. Even Styles here, he's very mysterious. He seems very kind of in the shadows here. And while I do still more or less how this scene was handled, Chris Pine just gives a really goofy scene here that should have worked okay, I guess. But just everything about him, including this scene, was just extremely hammy up to this point. But Florence Pugh now, holy hell is she the standout in this film. I thought her character was great. I liked her side of the story, and whenever she was, on screen, whenever, we were getting that side of her story, not even, to the movie's, story, but just her story alone, I was hooked consistently. And obviously, yes, she is the lead actress. She is the most interesting character, which kind of sucks because with a movie like this that seems so vast, you think, well, everyone's doing an important job trying to make this world kind of, come to, a standpoint where we, get it all from different sides. And, with her character, there's a lot of subliminal imagery. There's a lot of, cryptic kind of background throughout. But in saying that, there was a point, in the film that, has to do with the men at a certain point, which I will not spoil, where you start possibly putting, some pieces together, and Florence Pugh's character goes down this route that I think, could work, as far as where the film is going up to this point, but I just think that could have been executed much more creatively. But regardless of my flaws, or the cliches or the, complaints that I had up to this point, and even, so on, throughout, I still think that the film, did what it could more or less with being cryptic. And now going forward to where, things are much more intense at this point, I started, having this thought, which, I wasn't really for or against it, but, I understand to an extent, that this kind of, needed to happen more or less, but the cryptic imagery and subliminal stuff that I was talking about earlier, I'm not one to judge this because I don't know, what's in store for the movie. I don't know where it's going or what the whole mystery is or what's going on. So, again, do as you will, and I think that this is, fair to have that, subliminal cryptic kind of mystery to it. But it was just so consistent, man, to the point where I couldn't even focus on the movie because it was just this for the longest time. And also another thought I was starting to have, I would say maybe the halfway point or so, is you get to a point where it's you're almost forced to kind of think about it all, even while you're going through the movie about, okay, so where did things actually get to this point? How did this all even begin? And I just kind of came to this this thought where it's things worked pretty well in the moment, but as far as the whole film goes, when you're actually looking back and connecting everything, you do feel a bit lost and things just feel completely out of place at times. But going back to Chris Pine's character, yeah, I can't stress enough how little he did for the movie for me. Aside from the character that he was supposed to be portraying, I think the movie could have worked fine without him. Which again, I know that his character is supposed to be cryptic and everything, but going back to like what I said earlier with, how the rest of the film kind of felt in the aspects that I really, did enjoy, as well as especially, Florence Pugh's like character story, like her side of what she gave, it just didn't feel nearly as on par. But I do think that in saying that, in his defense, that it was kind of a case where up to this point, he didn't really have too much, to share, as far as like the spotlight goes. But also going forward, which kind of contradicts this now, is that like we see a pretty solid plot point at this area, where it's like an interaction between his and Florence Pugh's character, which should be a huge, milestone for his character in this movie. It's the first time that we actually, could have the chance for him to really give a deliverance and really kind of showcase his character. And, especially for, again, Florence Pugh's character, and for the rest of the movie, how it, is supposed to be feeling, he just did not deliver it for me. It just didn't work for me. But now getting to the end of the film, I will say this, that the film does go down a route that I kind of respected because of just how much of a departure it is from the rest of the film. In really every sense of the word. I do think that as far as like a last act goes, it did have a number of things going for it. But I just honestly can't stress enough how polarized I was with the film's conclusion, which obviously I will not spoil. It was just a very strange route to take. Like, I would say to the point where, like, when things start to get uncovered and you start to kind of, like, process it all and figure it all out to a point, like, I really just could care less about what could have happened afterward. Again, I do believe that the film had potential with its conclusion, but as far as its structure goes, like, just how everything came to be, I feel like it was just a really big loss on the film's end. And with saying this, another, like, one of the biggest issues I could say I had, as well, was Harry Styles' performance. I think that it is the worst that we have seen from the character at this point. But now getting to the film's actual ending, its actual climax. Like I said, for much of this movie, I do think that it does deliver for what it could. In all things considered, it does feel like, as big as it possibly could be. But in saying that, it is kind of like an ending where, up to this point, you kind of get the feeling that, like, it just kind of had to go with itself. It just kind of had to just stick with it. Just go for it. And I honestly just couldn't take it all that seriously. But it is not a bad ending, and I do think that there are good things to it. And I also do think that it did, more or less what it could. Even if that is just, exceeding upon a already pretty flip-floppy film. Overall, guys, I'm going to give Don't Worry Darling a solid 5 to a 5.1 out of 10 with an overall pretty mixed review. So guys, that is going to do it for my review of Don't Worry Darling. This film, I didn't hate it. I actually thought, like, if I had to argue, I thought it was better than not. But it was a film that definitely, again, like I said, there's a lot of good aspects to it and a lot of things that work in the moment in their own right. But once you actually look back and connect them all, that's where things get a little bit weird. But yes, guys, that is going to do it for my Don't Worry Darling review. Let me know what you guys thought about the movie for those that did see it, as well as my review down below. Just don't spoil anything in the comments for the rest. But yes, guys, my next review will be Smile. The movie does come out on September 30th, but I will be catching an early screening on the 27th, so look forward to that. But yes, guys, without further ado, I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great night. Take care.